Well, 2025 has started off quite crazy, and the first big piece of news that we're going to talk about is Justin Trudeau. That's right, the Prime Minister of Canada has officially announced his intention, that's the key word, to resign as the leader of the Liberal Party. He's not resigning as the Prime Minister.
I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process.
As you can see, his intention is to resign as the leader of the Liberal government. So what is this all going to entail? We're going to break down what this is actually going to mean to us as Canadians and what's actually happening out there so we get a clear image of what to expect moving forward. This channel wasn't necessarily meant to be a political channel, but I think it's very important as business owners, investors, entrepreneurs, that we understand what's happening when it comes to the government because it directly impacts us and our ability to make money and earn a living here in Canada. So let's talk about it. You're listening to the Manning Up on Real Estate podcast with your host, Cameron Manning. We bring you the industry experts each episode who will help you man up on your real estate career. Welcome back to another episode of Manning Up After Dark. Let's talk about what is happening with Trudeau. Well, as we can see from that earlier clip, Justin Trudeau has announced his intention to resign.
I intend to resign
as the leader of the Liberal government. Does that mean that he has actually resigned? No. Justin Trudeau is still the Prime Minister of Canada and still the leader of the Liberal government until such a time as they go through and announce a new leader. And one of the major things that's happening is that he's actually doing what's called proroguing government.
And the House will now be prorogued until March 24th.
What this means is that the government is now going to be frozen until such a time as it gives the Liberal Party a chance to go through an arduous screening, candidate selection, and of course vote to bring in a new leader in which they can then say is their leader of the Liberal government and potentially make them the new Prime Minister of Canada. So that means that Justin Trudeau and all of his cabinet members will continue to operate as normal in terms of their duties as Prime Minister and cabinet members. However, the biggest part of proroguing government is the fact that Parliament is now frozen. No new laws can be passed. Nothing can be brought forward. They will not come back into Parliament until the end of March, which gives the Liberal government their chance to then find a new leader. Now, is this what Canadians want? Not likely. Most Canadians, in fact, wanted an election. We wanted the opportunity to be able to select our leader. We did not want to give them a chance to select and go through their own personal process to be able to select who's going to run the country moving forward. But here's more big issues that we need to understand with this decision. First and foremost, the NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, was threatening to do a non-confidence vote when Parliament came back into play at the end of January. By proroguing the government, this now pushes off any chance for a non-confidence vote until at least the springtime. So we will not be heading into an election at least until late spring if a non-confidence vote still gets voted. The opportunity for the Liberal governments to select a new leader also potentially means that maybe they can have a conversation with the NDP and keep the coalition going between them now that Justin Trudeau is no longer going to be the leader after that time. It also gives an opportunity for the Liberals to hopefully try to save a little face out there and maybe select a leader who can maybe change some of the views that Canadians have. Right now, as it sits, as we head into 2025, the Liberal government is absolutely polling at some of the worst it's done in a long time. In fact, the Conservative governments are sitting at about 44% of the polls, which means that if they were to go to an election, there's a high likelihood that the Conservatives would win a super majority, meaning that many Liberal MPs and many NDP as well would likely lose their seats in the House, and they would then essentially be out of a job when it comes to Canadian federal politics. And the biggest issue for many of them is a lot of them are coming up to their potential pensions. This is a conversation we've heard many, many times, especially when it came to Jagmeet Singh, but there's many Liberal MPs that are on the list to potentially earn their pensions if they last past a certain point. If they lose their seat, they lose their opportunity at those pensions, which means we as Canadians are being held hostage based on politicians' greed and wanting what's best for themselves instead of what's best for the country. I mean, it's par for the course. That is politics at the end of the day. However, it's really to be understood what's actually happening as Canadians, that we need to know what is really happening behind the scenes. So while we hear these things about Trudeau was resigned, we know exactly what the actual facts are and what it means. Now, some of the bigger issues that we need to think about if we don't have Parliament now for the next 2.5 months is this. One, no new laws are going to be passed. No new bills are going to be able to be brought forward. Our government, our economy essentially is just going to be on standby for that time frame. Now, the good news in some cases is certain bills that were brought forward but haven't passed royal assent yet are also going to be basically thrown away. Case in point, there was the capital gains bill that was going to increase the number of capital gains. That now is not going to be happening. It still could happen in the future, but somebody is going to have to bring it to the floor, pass it as a bill, and start from scratch, essentially. While some might not be the best news, maybe for some of us, it might be actually a good thing. But there's also a bigger issue here is what happens now that we've got a president coming in, President Trump threatening Canada with an extreme amount of tariffs. Well, the good news is, at the very least, is that just because Parliament is suspended, it doesn't remove the ability for Justin Trudeau and his party to be able to respond to things that happen here in Canada. In fact, they still have the power that they don't have to go through the Parliament to be able to address these situations. For example, they could counter tariff goods coming in from the US. This is actually something that happened in the first term of President Trump, where he was threatening tariffs and they ended up doing counter tariffs in order to combat this. However, it is to be known that President Trump, even though he made what seems like it was a joke about making Canada the 51st state and Trudeau would get to stay on as governor, he has continued this conversation in most recent press conferences, and he has intentions of wanting to bring in the Panama Canal, Greenland, and Canada as the 51st state. Now, he did say, luckily, that he's not looking to do this by force, but he did say it's going to be based on economic force. And that's something we need to be aware of.
So real fast, you said you were considering military force to acquire Panama and Greenland. Are you also considering military force to annex and acquire Canada?
No. Economic force.
So right now, we've got a government that is frozen, a leadership race that's going to be happening that is going to select the next leader, potentially the next prime minister in term for Canadians, not us getting to choose, but they get to choose. And we have the threats from the US as well. This is not a good start to 2025. And as business owners and as entrepreneurs, as investors, we need to be aware of all these things, because obviously anytime there's chaos, anytime there's anything like this, it could potentially create some opportunity for us. We need to be cognizant and keep our eye open for these opportunities. Some of the things I talked about in a previous podcast is if this does happen, the Bank of Canada is likely going to have to do some stuff to stimulate our economy to combat any issues that arise because of these tariffs, because of this proroguing, because of all the chaos that's happening. We might see rates come down a little further, especially if we are seeing a stagnated growth in our economy. The other thing that we need to consider is that there is still a possibility that we could go to a vote in spring, depending who gets voted in as the leader, can have a conversation with NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and maybe rewrite that cooperation agreement. Maybe they continue to vote the same way and we continue to not see a non-confidence vote, meaning that the Liberal government's got to choose the next prime minister, choose the next leader, and we as Canadians don't have a say on what's happening. So there is a lot to unpack here when it comes to this. And again, this podcast was never meant to be a political based podcast. However, it's important, as I mentioned, as business owners, as entrepreneurs, as investors, we really need to understand what happens with the government, because it does directly impact our business. And we need to be able to adjust our business practices to be able to survive any changes that happen out there. At the end of the day, no matter what happens, we have the staying power as citizens as long as we do the right thing and we continue to grow our businesses, as we continue to operate from integrity, unlike politicians, and continue to focus on ourselves, our communities, and the people around us as a whole. It's going to be interesting to watch what happens, but we're going to keep an eye on it for you guys here on the Manning Up on Real Estate podcast. And if you're not already subscribed, then I highly suggest you go down, hit that subscribe button so you continue to stay updated with what's happening out there in the world that you need to know about. And of course, we're heading into 2025. We're going to have a lot of great episodes. We're going to do more interviews this year. That is definitely on the plate. And of course, if you're listening to this podcast, don't forget to rate it. And I would like to hear from you guys. What do you think is going to be the outcome of this prorogued government? Who are we going to see as the next leader of the Liberal Party? And are we going to go to an election in the springtime? Drop those comments. Let's have a conversation. Let's keep a healthy debate going on. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.